How we doing? How we doing? How we doing? Great to have you with us. Hello again, everybody. We welcome you to Dialed In. I'm Thom Brennaman. Coming up on the show today, we'll be joined by legendary Chicago sports columnist. That's saying something. An author as well. From the Daily Herald, Barry Rozner retired 2 years ago after nearly 40 years at that newspaper. We come your way twice a week, so Mondays we're live at 9:15 a.m. on Chatterbox, and we'll post later in the day on the Believe Network. Fridays on both Believe and Chatterbox will be on Chatterbox Sports at noon, following Off the Bench on Fridays. You can join us on YouTube/Chatterbox Sports page. Friday, we always have our big interview. That's the goal. We had Chip Carey from the St. Louis Cardinals 2 weeks ago. Chris Myers from Fox Sports, kind enough to join us last week. You can learn who our guests will be. Just follow us on X at Thom Brennaman TV, and great to have you with us. Barry Rozner grew up in the suburbs of Chicago. Not a lot different than you and me, right? Played sports, played baseball, but his first love was hockey. In fact, he was still lacing them up at better than 55 years old as recently as a couple of years ago. While attending Northern Illinois University, he was a vendor at the ballpark, right? Both at baseball and historic Chicago Stadium, home of the Bulls and the Blackhawks. But he wanted to be a sports writer, and his dreams came true nearly 40 years ago at the Daily Herald. Started as a beat writer covering the Chicago Cubs. That's where Barry and I met. He was on the beat. I was a new broadcaster for the team. We hung out virtually morning, noon, and very, very late at night, I might add, at cities all over North America for about 6 straight years. Those were the days of the Cubs of Ryne Sandberg and Rick Sutcliffe. Sammy came along, Harry Carey, Steve Stone. In fact, Barry wrote a book with both Ryne Sandberg and then another with Steve Stone. I'm blessed to call him my friend for these many years, many, many decades. My pleasure to welcome in to Dialed In, Barry Rozner. Barry, great to see you, man. You haven't changed a bit. How's retirement treating you?
Oh, it's phenomenal. Played golf yesterday, 75 degrees in Chicago in February. Unheard of. It's never happened before. I'm outside in a golf shirt and shorts yesterday, if you can believe that.
Yep.
But yeah, played golf. Then we had tornadoes come through, and now the wind chill's like 0 today. So that's living in Chicago, which you know very well. But retirement is great. It's really indescribable for someone like me who grinded for so long and for so hard, and really for the last 20 years of my career working sometimes 5 jobs at a time with TV and radio and many other things besides being a columnist. And so to be able to shut it down, I didn't think it would ever happen. Like, I thought I'd work another 10 years for sure, but to be able to just shut it down and breathe and spend time with my girls who are now grown and out of the house, and spend time with my wife and just do the things I want to do, which frankly, most of the time is not a lot. I mean, mostly I want to play golf or hit balls or, take trips to see golf or play golf. It's an amazing feeling to shut it down and just breathe after so many years of grinding so hard.
You know, in your farewell column, which was just unbelievable, by the way, you guessed you were in the neighborhood of 12,000 bylines, written over 10 million words. I know you're asked this frequently, but was there a favorite column? Or is there a difference between maybe a favorite and a most impactful column?
And excuse me, in terms of favorites, I would say the last one is certainly in the top 3 or 4. Both my brother and my dad passed away in 2019, about 6 weeks apart, and that was the last of my family. So those columns were pretty emotional, and I thought fairly well done under the circumstances. But probably my favorite column ever was one I wrote about Peggy Kaczynski, and that was also in the summer of 2019. I'm sure you remember him,
Yep.
or sorry, you remember her, Tommy,
Yep.
from NBC5 in Chicago. Just a phenomenal broadcaster, but a really good reporter. And I think you might agree with me. There's not a lot of reporting that goes on anymore, certainly not in broadcast media, really not much in print either. But she was a phenomenal reporter, and she told the story of how her career came to an end. And I'll sum it up for you very briefly. But her sister was dying of cancer, and they were very, very close. And something happened during the Stanley Cup playoffs when Patrick Kane scored an overtime goal, and she was so disturbed by everything that was happening in her life that she could barely function at that time. And she asked what everyone else thought was a really stupid question in a post-game press conference. And really, she thought she was being sarcastic or funny, but it came out really bad. Everyone in the room looked at her, and that started a tumble for her, which really led to her calling it quits. And so the column dealt with grief and loss and work, and the way in which really the rest of the media can attack you and sort of take you apart in real time. And of course, this goes on Twitter, or X as we call it now, and on all social media. And it probably by numbers was more widely read than anything I ever wrote. I mean, probably similar to the last column I wrote, but somewhere in that neighborhood. But I would say that's probably I would consider that the best thing that I had ever written up to that point, and it's one that sticks out for me. And I highly recommend you go find it. I don't have Daily Herald access anymore. I'd tell you how to get it from behind the paywall, but maybe you can find it somewhere else, or pay the $1 or whatever it is for a one-time fee. That one sticks out for me, Tommy.
All right, how about least favorite? One that if you had a do-over.
Wow. Nobody's ever asked me that. That's a great question. Least favorite column. I can't think of one off the top of my head. I mean, we all make mistakes. I'm sure I made mistakes. I'm sure there were some that I missed and missed badly. It happens if you're going to, write several hundred columns a year. I can't think of one off the top of my head. I'll just say this, that there were 2 times. I mean, look, I didn't go out of my way to trash people. I did if it was necessary, but I felt that I was just telling the truth and being fair. But I wasn't a rip and slash guy. I know that's sort of the way of the world. But I thought being fair was more important than the rip and slash. But there were 2 times that I wouldn't criticize someone. One was when they made the Hall of Fame, even if they were someone that I didn't think believed worthy of the Hall of Fame. I just shut up that day and didn't write about it. The other was when somebody died who was not a particularly good person. I also felt that was not a day in which to stomp all over someone's grave. So those were the things I tried to avoid. I'm sure there were. I know there's mistakes that I made. I know there's bad columns that I wrote. I just can't think of one right now because mostly, Tommy, I've tried to forget everything that I ever did over the last 40 years.
I try to do that with most of the things that happened in my life 30 years ago. Or maybe back in August of 2020. I try to forget about that one as well.
Yeah,
which brings to mind, you brought up about someone dying. I did not know Jerry Krause, legendary longtime general manager of the Bulls, put those teams together. Was not necessarily portrayed all that favorably at times by the big stars, Jordan and Pippen and so on and so forth. There was the incident a month and a half ago, whatever it was. He has since passed, and they were honoring one of those great teams, and his widow was there, and it was ugly. I mean, your thoughts on I just couldn't believe it because I feel like I know, not like I know the Chicago sports fan, and I know they have great hearts. Maybe it's just where we are as a society, Barry. I don't know.
Well, I think it's a combination of two things. One is where we are as a society, where no one has that really people don't take responsibility for their actions, and they're allowed to just say or do anything that they want to do. It was very cruel what happened at the United Center that many weeks ago. The other part of it is, and if you'll allow me a minute or two on this, I can describe how this all came to be because I was in the middle of all this. I obviously knew Jordan. I covered those teams. I knew Jerry Krause very well. I didn't know Phil Jackson that well, but I knew people around that team well. And the truth is, Jerry Krause put together championship teams. Now, that's not easy to do around Michael Jordan, but he did. Not only did he draft Pippen and Grant, and Pippen was thought to be a huge reach by many people at that time. He also traded for Cartwright, which was a very unpopular deal. But, I'm naming these names because they don't win without these guys. Obviously, look, Michael Jordan's the greatest player of all time. In my opinion, it is not close. I think it is an idiotic conversation, and I won't have it. I simply won't have it. If I'm playing golf, if I'm at a bar, whatever it is, and you start in on that, I mean, I'm leaving because I'm not that is so stupid. I'm not having it. He's the greatest of all time. He is the reason for the 6 championships, period. Okay. However, Krause did some really, really good things. I mean, the Rodman idea, which was probably Jim Stacks, who was the assistant GM to Krause at the time. Nevertheless, Krause bought into it. And he said, okay, Jim, fly down to Texas and see if this guy, has any sanity left and if this will work. And, with Bison Dele, who we knew as, was that Jason Williams, I believe was his name before that, those kinds of things, those pieces that he picked up, Ron Harper.
Yep.
He did a lot of great.
Paxson, Kerr, on and on.
Exactly. Luke Longley, who, as far as I know, never dunked a basketball at 7'3", but nevertheless, was still a part of, an important part of those teams. So, I mean, I could list you many, many names, and Jerry Krause is responsible for those things. Jerry Krause was also his worst enemy because of the things that he said publicly. Because, look, he was a fat, poor Jewish kid who was abused from the time he was 5 years old until the time that he died, and was incredibly insecure and never felt like he got the credit that he deserved. So when he spoke publicly, I think always in the back of his mind was, why don't I get more credit for this stuff? So every time he spoke, he got himself into trouble. So he was his own worst enemy. It doesn't take away in any way, shape, or form from the things that he did to help build those teams and to help be a part of those championships. Again, we know the main reason they won those championships. Okay. It's 23, and you could leave the discussion there if you wanted to, but I bring these things up because the way that, Jordan, and I think Phil Jackson bears a huge responsibility in this because he really helped stoke the flames behind the scenes. He helped rev those guys up. And, when Jerry Krause would get on a bus and those guys would be in the back yelling things at him, I mean, that's just inappropriate. The head coach at that point has got to put a stop to that, and he never did. Excuse me. Not used to talking much anymore because nobody cares what I think. Nobody cares what I think, especially in my house. Nobody cares what I think. But I think Phil bears a huge responsibility there. I think it's shameful what happened at the United Center. I wrote about Jerry Krause many times, including when he died. And I think it's really unfortunate that really a terrific basketball mind, and also, by the way, a great baseball scout.
Yep.
Both before his basketball career and after, I think it's shameful that he gets no credit. I think it's shameful that at this point in their lives, that Michael in The Last Dance, which was a phenomenal series. I've watched it many times. It was just brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I think it's a shame that at this point in all of their lives, they're all what they're all either 60 or older. Phil's got to be what, close to 80 at this
Yep.
point. And by the way, Phil has no career without Jerry Krause. I don't know how many people know that he was unemployed when Jerry Krause plucked him and put him on Doug Collins' staff. Phil Jackson did not have a job. I just think it's a shame that at this point in their lives, these people can't be a little more generous and a little more forgiving, and to say, yeah, we didn't like some of the things that he said, and yeah, he had crumbs on his shirt at all times, and he was kind of a mess of a person, but he wasn't a bad guy, and
No.
he did a good job, and he never tried to hurt anyone. He never intentionally, uh, said the wrong things or hurtful things. And I just think it's awful what happened at the United Center, and I think it's a shame that these guys couldn't stand up and say after Jerry Krause died, and couldn't say, yeah, actually he did a good job, and we're sorry that things went the way that they did. I mean, at what point in your life are you old enough where you can forgive those who you think have done you wrong, and try to forget about the bad times and remember the good? There
Hmm.
was so much good. I know people, Tommy, who were at that celebration, Bulls people, who were shocked at some of the things that went on there. There were still some cliques. There were still some groups huddled to the side. There were still guys that, while everyone was supposed to get together, went off and had their own party, and guys still trying to control narratives and control the group.
It's a shame.
I
It's a
find it all
shame.
very disappointing. Yeah.
Yep, I agree. You and I started together when you were on the Cubs beat, and it's such a different world on so many levels than it was back then. In your business, whether it was deadlines, the business itself, newspaper business,
Sure.
the increase in the electronic media, the players, the money, social media. I just felt like, Barry, the last number of years, hell, the last decade that I was doing baseball, I never feel like people are having any fun anymore.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think that's in a lot of sports, don't you? Don't you feel that in most of the sports? I mean,
I
uh,
think baseball is just so unique. I've never been on a basketball beat, so I can't speak to that one. But football, you're once a week. It's an event. You're limited how much time you have, and all these kinds of things. But baseball, I remember it. I mean, it's not like calling anybody out because I'd say it if he was sitting here. I mean, Mark Grace wouldn't be afraid to go out and have a beer with us, or reliever Les Lancaster. We weren't the evil media, right? But now, and maybe it is all those things I just mentioned. I just look at these guys now, and they're very talented. Don't get me wrong; they're unbelievably talented. But nobody looks like they're having any fun. They're getting to the ballpark at 10, 11 o'clock in the morning for a 7 o'clock game, and then they just do it all over and over and over and over again. And these are young men in their early to mid 20s to late
yeah.
20s to early 30s.
Yeah, I mean, it's 8 months. It's 8 months of every single day. You better be having some fun out there. And we grew up with guys. I mean, you were in baseball a lot earlier than I was because you lived it as a kid. You were at the ballpark all the time. You saw guys having fun. You saw guys always having fun. I think there's a lot of reasons for that. The one the that it's changed so much. I Especially from when I started in. I mean, I was doing sidebars by 1985. I was still vending in 1984, which, by the way, reminds me, if you were going to sum up my entire career, I think Ryan Sandberg said it best when he said, about a year after he retired, he came up to me at the batting cage and he said, uh, "So let me get this straight. You go from being a vendor to having a Hall of Fame vote?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that."
Yeah, yeah.
I said, "Well, Sorry, man. Yeah, so 84 was my last year of vending, graduated from college. By 85, I was doing sidebars at baseball games and watching legends on the field. By 1990, I'm covering the team. I think that you're right. Those guys insisted on having fun because how else are you going to survive 8 months of baseball? That grind is just brutal. I would say the things that come to mind right away are social media.
Yep.
You can't be out at a bar having
Yep.
fun
Yep.
because you could be doing absolutely nothing wrong. You could be in the hotel bar or a cab ride away from your hotel having a beer after a game. Somebody snaps a picture and now you're a drunk, or
Yep.
you're not committed to your craft, or you were trying to pick up a girl or whatever it is, and now that's it. Now that's with you. John Tortorella, coach of the Flyers, said it best a couple months ago about a story about a guy whose name you won't know, and it doesn't matter. But he said, you guys do this stuff, and that's it. That's the narrative now. That's with you forever. There's no nuance anymore in journalism, and there's certainly no nuance on social media where everything is black and white. So I think a guy can't go out and have a beer after a game. So that's going to make your season a lot longer when all you can do is go back to your room and play video games. It doesn't seem like a great life to me. The other thing, Tommy, is analytics, which I don't believe are evil in any way, shape, or form. But I do believe that a lot of the beauty of the game and the creativity of the game and the ability to think the game have left the game for a lot of guys. So I think they get to the park and there's a computer in front of them or there's a printout in front of them, and they're at that moment being told how to play the game for that day. I'm trying to imagine. Well, I don't have to imagine Greg Maddux getting a printout in front of him, because I asked him when I was still working. I asked him about spin rate and hoping for a good answer, and got exactly what I expected. He said, you can shove spin rate up your ass. I need to know. I need to know where a guy where his bat speed is today. I need to know what his feet are doing in the box. I need
Yep.
to know how he's reacting to my changeup today, and how he's reacting to my cutter, and how he's reacting to my two seamer. And that sort of creativity is what he loved about the game. That's what he lived for. He didn't keep a book. He didn't even watch a lot of video, because today is a different day. Today is entirely different than 5 days ago. It's certainly different than the last time I faced these guys 8 weeks ago,
Yep.
or maybe a year ago. The wind is different today. The humidity is different today. The umpire is different today. Everything is different today. And that's what he loved. He loved starting over every time and creating a new masterpiece. So I don't think analytics are evil. I think they're great. I think they add a lot to the game. I think they also rob some guys of their creativity and maybe their ability to think the game.
Yep.
So I think you're right. I think they're not having a lot of fun. I know if you and I were as young as we were when we were that age and out on the road, and frankly, I'm not sure how we lived through some of that. And I don't know, I don't know why we lived through it. Thank God we did. We had some very good times together. But I think you just can't do that anymore. I don't know that we would be doing that anymore, because it's just so dangerous, even if you're not doing anything wrong.
You look at and then you start to think about not just the players or what we were doing, but then you start to look at, to carry it another step or two further, into the broadcasters themselves. My dad has said tens of thousands of times that in the environment we live in now, he would never be hired. Well,
100%.
if he wouldn't be hired, our old dear friend who we were with for years and years and years and years, Harry Carey, would never be hired. Now you stop and you think about that for a second. And a lot of the younger generation, they only knew Harry as this guy that they perceived as drinking all the time at the ballpark, which wasn't always true at all. He had a stroke. And a lot of people have some issues. Whether for him it was saying Cubs, he had to say Cub, and things like that. But I think about the incredible amount of joy that fans would be deprived of if guys like Harry Carey, Marty Brennaman, Bob Prince, there are many, many others that would, Ken Harrelson for that matter, whether you love him or hate him. I mean, the guy, he was White Sox through and through. No chance he gets a job now.
No. You're 100% right on all of those names. I had you on my radio show, 5, 6, 8 years ago. I don't even remember when it was. And I said, Tommy, you still tell the truth. And that is so rare in broadcasting today, even in national broadcasts, where it seems like there's a quid pro quo with everything that they say. I don't know if it's for the access or for the friendship, but not everybody is great, and not everybody is good, and not everybody makes a great play. And it's not like you're looking for the bad, but sometimes there's bad. And if you don't tell the truth, the people at home are not fooled. Yep. Okay. And they know you're lying. And so I said to you I asked you this, and I'd like for you to explain it again, but I asked you how you feel about still being honest when almost no one else in the entire world of broadcast is. And you made the comparison to Procter and Gamble, and if you were working for Procter and Gamble. So I think you should.
Well, I mean, basically, and this was shared with me by someone much smarter than I am, who's a friend, where they said, look, and this is a company owner of himself, and we were having this conversation. He said, could you imagine Procter and Gamble hiring a spokesperson, and they're in a press conference, and they're asked about Tide or any of their products, right? Oil of Olay, pick anything you want. Hundreds of them out there. Crest. And all of a sudden that person got up there and started bashing the product. Well, when you look at it through that lens, I kind of understood where he was coming from. And I didn't hear that until much later in my career. But you're right. There is such a thing as bad things. You can have a bad broadcast. You can have a bad column. You can have a bad day. You can have a bad at-bat. You can make a bad play in the field. And if you just say it, hey, cost his team 2 runs, you move on. You don't have to pound somebody over the head with it. But, I mean, you do that now, and it's like, man, oh, man, oh, man, nobody is hiring anybody that will say even the least controversial sort of thing about anybody that puts on that uniform. And I think it's too bad for the person at home. I do.
Yeah, because they're not getting an honest broadcast, and they know they're being lied to. I consume a lot of hockey, a lot of golf, a lot of NFL, a lot of college football. I would say those are the main things at this point. Since I quit, I haven't been able to quite start watching baseball again. I have a lot of PTS from 40 years of going to the ballpark. But that'll come in time because I love the game. I do like that pitching, speed, and defense seem to be not something that's so hated anymore. I understand analytics don't care about pitching or the craft of it or speed or defense, but it looks like maybe some of the changes are helping bring those things back. But when I watch a lot of events, I have to mute the broadcast. And what does that tell you? Because it's just so bad, and I can't consume it that way. I was thinking about 10 minutes before we started this that I remember in 1994, I was walking through the lunchroom at Wrigley Field, going to get a pop or a coffee or something. And the TVs are always on in the lunchroom, near the press box. And it's Harry and Steve Stone, and they're doing their broadcast. And the Cubs were so bad in 94. I mean wretched. And every day was the same as the day before. Bad pitching, bad base running, and especially bad defense.
Yeah.
And I'm in the lunchroom, and a ball goes through somebody's legs, and there's silence on the broadcast. And all of a sudden I hear, boy, oh boy, what a lousy ball club.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. You're not hearing that anymore, brother. He was the greatest. We had a lot of laughs with him. I want to
I
get to
came in,
two.
I just want to say one more thing. I came in the booth after that and told you guys in the radio booth, and I think for most of your career, you have mixed in a boy, oh boy,
Oh yeah, oh
at
yeah.
least at least a couple times a week from that point forward. But yeah, this guy's not Harry Carey's not going to get hired today because
No.
he can't just say what he thinks. But that's why he was beloved, because when his team was winning, nobody was happier,
Yep.
and when his team was losing, nobody felt worse. He was the voice of the fans, and it was okay. And today it's not. I think it's a shame.
Yeah. I want to cover two more topics with you before we let you go, and thank you for your generosity with your time here.
Well, I'm really busy, Tom.
Well, I know you're.
I
I know. But you
have a
got
lot
stuff
of
going on.
I have a lot of things I have to do today. Since I already worked out, what time is it? So for the rest of my day, I got to go hit balls for 16 minutes. That's
Okay. All
I'm
right.
gonna have
Well,
to
it's a good
mix that
spot to
in.
be in.
I'm gonna have to mix that in sometime today.
Yeah.
So
Well, be careful.
generous with my
Don't overdo
generous
it.
with my yeah. I
Don't
have
overdo it.
truly have nothing to do, and I'm really happy about that.
In
So go ahead.
2003, you were still working. I was broadcasting the National League Championship Series for Fox. And everybody knows about Game 6, the Bartman game. I have described that scene there as unlike anything I've ever seen. Because we were down in Miami. Josh Beckett beats the Cubs in Game 5. Now here we come back, off day, Game 6. There were 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, 10 times as many people outside the stadium as there were inside the stadium.
Oh, yeah.
I have always felt like that night changed Chicago sports forever, and not necessarily in a positive way. Do you agree with that?
Wow, I hadn't drawn a direct line from when it became a less friendly sports town to that moment, but I don't think I could disagree with you on that. And it really obviously what happened happened. There were 12 people who stuck their hands up. The photograph of is of one guy with his headphones on and his dorky glasses, and his life is ruined forever because Moises Alou throws a fit.
Yep.
I don't think he's catching the ball under any circumstances, by the way, but Moises Alou throws a fit. Dusty Baker crushes the guy in his post-game remarks, and that's like, everybody grabbing a pitchfork and a torch at that point. And then a couple of reporters found out who this guy was, chased him down out of the stadium. He was identified, and that was the end of his existence. Of course, an idiotic thing. I mean, first of all, you got the Josh Beckett game. That was a winnable game. Aramis Ramirez pulls a home run foul. If he doesn't, they probably, the series is probably over right there. So they lose that game. Josh Beckett's phenomenal. They blow Game 6, which you and I could go through the play-by-play and talk about the 15 things that the players did wrong and Dusty Baker did wrong in that game. And then, of course, they blow Game 7. God bless Kerry Wood. He was done. He's an admirable guy. He said he choked afterward.
Yes, he is.
He said he choked afterward. He didn't. He had been abused horribly by Dusty Baker that year and had absolutely nothing left. So, it was the players and the manager who lost it. It wasn't a guy in the stands. And what happened to him was horrific. And I think your theory on that is incredible, because I'm not sure that I ever thought of that. But maybe that's the day, because, this wasn't traditionally New York or Philadelphia or Boston. It was a much softer town. And in many respects, it still is. I mean, people here still think Mitch Trubisky's going to the Hall of Fame. They think the idea of moving on from Justin Fields is like they're moving on from Patrick Mahomes. I mean, it's in many ways, it's still a very soft sports town. But in terms of the way that the fans treat certain athletes at games, maybe you're right, Tommy. Maybe that's the night it all changed.
Last thing I want to ask you about it, and you just touched on it, the Bears. Look, they've been bad for a long time. They've had multiple coaches. They've had front office changes. The only thing that hasn't changed is ownership. And now there's all this talk with a combine going on. What are they going to do with Justin Fields? Okay, now he has had fantastic moments. He has had far less than fantastic moments. We know Caleb Williams is available in the draft. The Bears have the number 1 pick. What do you think is going to happen? What do you think should happen?
What I think is going to happen is they're going to trade Justin Fields and they're going to draft Caleb Williams. I would consider, if I were them, trading out of that pick if I could still get the number 2 pick. And I believe that's doable. I believe you could probably still hold up Washington, and I got to call him Washington because that's what Mike Ditka always said. So in my world, it's Washington. I think you could hold them up. I think Jaden Daniels is a fascinating guy.
Yep.
Now, I am not smart enough to know which one of them is going to be the better player. I think they're both going to be really good players. I don't like comps. I wouldn't, I think it's crazy at this point. I think Caleb Williams is going to be a terrific player. That's not something I thought about Mitch Trubisky or Justin Fields. I think he's going to be a terrific player. I think Jaden Daniels has a higher ceiling. He probably has a lower floor as well, but he's fascinating to me. But regardless, I would trade Justin Fields. I would use one of those first 2 picks. They've got a lot of cap space. They have a lot of draft capital, and you have to reset the clock from a salary standpoint, because why would you pay all this money to a guy that you still don't know anything about? Anybody who if you've watched every game of his career, you know what Justin Fields is at this point. He's exactly what he appears to be, which is what you just said. He can sometimes be good. He can sometimes be bad. Mostly he's in the middle most of that time. He's incredibly talented physically. There's nothing he can't do on a football field. It's just that he doesn't know how to play quarterback yet. Now that can change. Justin Fields can learn how to play quarterback. He can learn how to get the call, process the call, make the call, walk to the line, change the call again, get the ball in his hands, and change his mind again. He can learn to do all those things. It's happened. It's not the usual thing that after 3 years you suddenly figure it out, but it does happen. And if it did happen, I'd be thrilled for him. He appears to be a really good kid, and he's so talented. If they traded him and he went and did great things somewhere else, I'd be thrilled for him. But it's 3 years in. I mean, C.J. Stroud, and again, comps are unfair. It took him, about 3 weeks to look like C.J. Stroud?
Yep.
Okay. Now, that's unusual. We know that's unusual. And I wouldn't expect Caleb Williams or Jaden Daniels to do that, because that's really unfair. But after 3 years, I think you have to say this is what he is. God bless him if he figures it out somewhere else. But to pay him a lot of money and to eat up a lot of really valuable cap space when you could bring in a rookie, get probably the same performance, which is uneven, at best, or maybe something much better than that. I think I think it's the responsible thing to do. The easy thing to do, Tom, the easy thing to do if you're Ryan Poles is keep Justin Fields, because that's what everybody here wants. I mean, they got him going to the Hall of Fame in Chicago. So you keep Justin Fields, you eat up all that cap space, you give him his money, and then you hope sometime in the next 2 years he becomes the guy that you want him to be. That doesn't seem logical to me. It doesn't seem realistic to me. It's not the prudent thing to do. It'd be the easy thing to do, but it's not the prudent thing to do. And this is not, I don't think, overly critical of Justin Fields. I think this is most quarterbacks who come into the NFL.
Yep.
I think this is most of them, isn't it?
Yeah,
isn't it?
It is.
I mean,
it is. Stroud is a total outlier by and large, and that's over the last even number of years, really. And Mahomes, once he got a chance to play.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't like the Caleb Williams comparisons to Patrick Mahomes. I think that's insane. You're talking about possibly
come on,
the greatest player at his position in the history of the game. I mean, he's gonna get at least 5 or 6 rings, right?
Yep,
maybe 8.
At least. Yep,
I mean, and again, Tom Brady is Tom Brady, but give Patrick Mahomes 10 more years. Who knows? I think that comparison is crazy. Don't do that to the kid. It's nothing against Justin Fields. I just think the wise thing to do, given the information that you possess today, is to trade Justin Fields and use one of those first 2 picks on a quarterback.
Barry, we can't thank you enough for your time, my friend. It's always great seeing you, man. I miss seeing you in person, and hopefully we'll be able to catch up sometime soon. You take care. Best to everybody, and Godspeed ahead, my friend. Thank you.
Back at on all accounts. It's great to see you, man. Give my best to your family, and I hope we get to see each other in person one of these days.
I hope so, too. Barry Rozner, longtime legendary sports columnist in Chicago. He's covered it all. We didn't get into the fact that he was a guy that broke that Phil Jackson getting the job story. And, the quote from that whole thing that I'll never forget is, and we were talking a little bit about there, and then next time we'll have Barry back, I'd like to ask him a little bit about Jerry Reinsdorf, because such a lightning rod figure in that city. And you think about our city where we are here. I mean, you'd kill to have a football owner that had won 1 championship. Franchises never won it. Right? The baseball franchise hasn't won it since 1990. Here, Jerry Reinsdorf has been the owner of a basketball team that has won 6 world championships, a baseball team in the White Sox that has won a World Series title, and yet, in the what have you done for me lately world, there are people that would like to see him sell everything. So be careful sometimes what you wish for. All right. Casey, thank you. Lindsay, thank you.
Thank you.
Stay out of trouble.
We'll stay out of trouble.
Is T. Higgins going to be here before we leave? Yay or nay at the start of 2024? Yay or nay?
He's going to be here.
He's going to be here.
Yeah. They're not trading him. They just don't do that.
Okay.
Too valuable.
All right. We'll talk about that on Monday. We come your way Monday again, Monday morning, 9:15 a live right here on Chatterbox Sports. Thanks so much for being with us. You're dialed in. We'll see you next Monday.